All right, guys, you got your boy Jet Stinger here today, and today, hey, we are here to talk about some of the best teams for Anjo. Now, she is finally here. We did do our big 200 summons for her. I hope you guys did enjoy that video. But we're going to be making some teams now for Anjo, and we're talking about why we're running the teams the way that we're running them. I'm actually going to be doing some pretty fun teams for you guys here this time. I'm going to be making teams based on all the contracts that she can actively form with, which is, the spirit and intelligence forming, the mineral and star, the beast, the plant. I'm gonna make teams based around all of those and talk about why they work and the particular contracts that work for them, that work the best for that. Now I'm gonna talk about, of course, the best version, because those are traditionally the whole point of the video, is talk about some of the best versions. But of course I will be naming some of the other options in the video as well if you have the time to listen, of course. But anyway, I've talked on for long enough. Let's go ahead and talk about some teams in this video. So I'll see you in just a moment. Alright, so this is going to be the first team for you guys here today, and this is going to be the beast to plant contract team, where we traditionally, of course, link off with either a beast or a plant based character, and we use the respective bonus, which of course, if you guys didn't know, it is +1 moxie whenever the bounded ally takes an action for Anjo. So this basically means if I ever do an action with Spahothea, for example, who is going to be our primary contract target, this means I effectively get +2 moxie, because you're going to get the moxie for Spahothea using the action anyway. Then you're going to get another additional moxie because of the effect of the contract, which is really cool. So what this team is structured around doing is really just funneling a lot of moxie to Anjo, so that when she can start firing off some really strong attacks with her ultimate, because her ultimate does have a pretty decent modifier of 500%, and it can be further boosted with negative statuses, which actually Spahothea does provide a negative status in burn, which of course means that it can be boosted by an additional 60% for a 560 modifier. That's absolutely not bad. So let's break down the units and let's talk about why we're running them today. So we're going to be choosing Spahothea first. She is going to be our main DPS of choice. I like Spahothea. You can of course choose any other real beast unit that you personally prefer, so long as they're a DPS role. I don't talk about using Shemaine, honestly. But I do think units like Millennia, of course Spoth is obviously who's right here. For plant units, you can use Marcus, you can use Jessica even. Like, the whole point is make sure that they're fairly active units. Spoth is fairly active in what she wants to do. If you don't know what Spoth does, basically TLDR, all you really do with Spahothea is buff and then attack. That's really just what she does, and then you buff for the final action, so when it's time to cast ultimate, it's time. Since you're going to be pairing her up with Anjo, she doesn't have it. You have to be a little bit more mindful, but the rotation indirectly stays the same. It's buff attack, buff attack, buff. That's it. Buff attack, buff attack, buff attack, buff. That's it. And then you should have enough of the moxie, because you're also going to be factor in Anjo's own incantations, which obviously going to be casting up her channel, which is going to allow her to fire off a nice AoE once these channel stacks resolve and go down to 0. So that's also a really good option there. But of course, no spot team is important without Isolde. Isolde is the tried and true glue to Spahothea teams, because she's able to make everyone put up stacks of burn. The only unit that doesn't attack here is Vila, because Vila doesn't have any offensive skills, but of course Vila is going to be the unit that we can use to buff up crit rate, crit damage. Now it really just depends on who you want to pair up with Vila, because Vila can only put up one song buff at a time, right? That means if it's put on Spahothea, for example, and then I want to put it on Anjo, it's going to take it off Spot and put it on Anjo. Now, for all intents and purposes, since Anjo is a mental based unit, putting it on Anjo technically is much better, because she gets the 30% crit rate and the 40% critical damage. But If you really wanted just Spalthea to get some nice strong early damage in, you can also still choose to link it off with Spalthea if you'd like. Now for mine, since mine is P5, mine doesn't necessarily need the crit rate because Spav gives herself a huge amount of crit rate as a part of one of her portraits. I think it increases her base crit rate whenever she is in the field to 50%, and then of course the acceleration, which gives you like 30% crit rate. She has 80% plus whatever stat she already had built into the kit. You know what I mean? Like she doesn't really need it. So then my Anjo becomes a little bit more open and able to be used to link off with. But other than that, if you're running like P0 Anjo, P0 Spalthea, it's not necessarily a bad idea to early buff Spath and then buff Anjo. Because one of the things that Spath does appreciate with Vila is also access to that Song of Passion, which of course gives her stronger modifiers. And since you will be using either 1 to 2 star casts of her incantations more as opposed to Anjo, because you're really just using it just as a funnel moxie to Anjo before she fires off her ult, that's something that you can choose to do. I mean, again, it's ultimately an option. But as I mentioned before, if you don't have Spoth, you can always run Marcus. Marcus is actually technically better for this specific type of team, but you will have to make sure that you have to meet the condition, which it does actually meet with this team. Now, you guys remember, Marcus has a special effect where she can give herself Moxie +1, and she can get herself into the Percival status wherever she casts a 2 to 3 star incantation. The reason why this is really, really good is because it's not casted to Marcus if she's bounded by Anjo. It's sent over to Anjo. So basically, if I were to do 2 actions with Marcus, right, and one of those actions was with a 2 star cast, because I mean basically, so long as Marcus gets hit, she's gonna be able to cast a 2 star cast of any card, or so long as she gets enough Eureka within the turn to do so. You can use a 2/1 and then just do whatever you need to do for the turn, whether you need to heal, set up debuffs, whatever. That's effectively a little bit more moxie that you can gain over time, because remember, you're getting the additional 2 moxie for pairing this up with Anjo. So that's 4 moxie in a turn. Then you're getting an additional 5th because of the Percival status, which is pretty darn nice. That's actually really sick. So that's really, really cool. That's why I do like her. Another interesting partner is also Argus. Argus is for the very same reason that you pair up with Marcus, because Argus has abilities where she can give herself an increase of Moxie with higher casting cards. Now, this of course means that you would have to kind of make some changes to the team. If you were to go Marcus, you can technically take Isolde out and put Argus in, and then make a link for that, or a contract bound for that if you wanted to. But again, I do think bounding with Marcus is more better because her Percival status is super easy to get into, as opposed to Argus, where it can be a little bit situational, because if you don't meet the 6 to 7 or the 5 to 6 star incantation for the round, then it can get a little bit tricky. So that's really just it. But that's really just what this core first team is about. It's about just using that link from whether a beast or a plant character to, of course, accelerate as much Moxie as you can with Anjo, and then Anjo can fire off some really strong ultimates. Again, you want to have instances where you can put up more negative statuses to make the ultimate shine a little bit better if you'd like. If you really don't want to necessarily run Spoth Isolde as a combo, if you were to go, for example, Marcus Argus, right? That's technically 2 negative statuses, because you know Marcus has the annotate status and Argus has the pinpointed status, which both of those are considered as negative statuses, which then would actually give Anjo a 120% modifier buff alongside the additional bonus she gets when casting off, because she can put up a collection of debuffs similar to 6. So that's actually a lot of debuffs that you can really spread very quickly if you wanted to run a different type of team like that. So for example, if you wanted to go this type of team, you would go Marcus, and then you would go Argus, and then that's just kind of just the team you need to run. Very simple. I mean, you have Marcus for the pinpointed, you have Marcus for the annotate, and then you have Anjo with her ability to put up a collection of debuffs, which is 2 random effects that is going to be put up to all enemies, which of course, as you can see here, is attack gets an additional 60% of mental damage for every type of negative status. And as we just confirmed earlier, pinpointed is a negative status. And guess what? Annotate, which is right here, negative status. So that means there's going to be a lot of modifier funneling that we can do with this type of team right here that's actually going to make Anjo's damage actually skyrocket. If you actually were to really make this build just a smidge bit better, I know my voice sounds kind of dead, I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit sick, but if you want to make this build just a smidge, just a very smidge, I would actually recommend in her resonance pattern that you pick up eludication. You want to pick up eludication because it gives an additional bonus of ultimate might. You see I'm already starting to work towards it, because I'm going to want to do this whenever I want to run this type of combination, so that I can kind of do a fun funneling video for Anjo for, just for content purposes, you know what I mean? But anyway, that's really just what it is that I am going to say with that team right there. But that's basically the first team. We're already 10 minutes into the video, but it's really just a general TLDR how that team's supposed to work. Anyway, that's going to be the beast plant side of what you should do with contracts for Anjo. There are, of course, still multiple other options that I mentioned before that you could link off with that I said before. There's Millennia if you really need to. Millennia actually technically really does help, because Millennia can actually battery more Moxie because of the Thief Master effect. So if you were to use a double, or if she's P0, you would use 1 AoE cast, which will actually put an extra Moxie on Anjo. If she's P2, then you can use double AoE to give 2 Moxie instead, which is actually pretty important. For Plant, as I said before, you have Marcus, who's a really good option. You have Argus. Jessica's not as great as an option because she doesn't really add too much to the team. She does add Poison, which is actually a negative status, which does work. Outside of that, that's really just it. I think it's just the Poison. But I mean, Poison, then you'd want Isolde in the team for debuffing for the extra, negative status that you can really accumulate with it. But anyway, that's going to be it for that team. I hope you guys did enjoy that, and let's get to the next team. Alright, so now we're going to be talking about the next team for you guys here today, and this is going to be specifically focusing on P1 Anjo. Now, the reason why I recommend this for P1 Anjo is because at P0, this, while it still can work, doesn't work as effectively. The reason being is because we're going to be really focusing on linking off with star and mineral based characters. And what this gives Anjo is a follow-up effect. Wherever they use an action, she will trigger a follow-up. However, this is only once per round. If you get her to P1, this number is then changed to 3 times per round, and the modifier is boosted to 275%, as you can actually see right here off of the portrayer effect right here. As you can see, Foreman Phantom's follow-up attack can be casted up to 3 times per round, and Angel's Temptation is boosted up to 250%. I said 275, my bad. But 250% is now the new modifier of this attack, right? Where that is going to be the whole purpose of this team. Now, if you really want my honest and true opinion about this, is the star and mineral pairings for her, while they're good, it's not the best for her. We'll talk about the other pairing in just a second and why that's usually the better option, despite it being primarily single target. But the really cool thing is that this whole thing is really just focusing on nuking enemies for AoE damage. Now, you do have Ju, who's a who's still really good. Obviously, I know people say, well, she's kind of falling off. I mean, she's not the best unit anymore, but she's still very good because of her consistent attack. And if you have her up with a lot of portrays as well, if you actually decided to wail on her as a limited character, then she, of course, obviously will perform better. But at P0, Ju still does the job. And that is because Ju is actually a pretty AP focused unit. Now, we are using this with the consideration of P1 Anjo, so I apologize for the people that really just only got P0 and bounced, but I really want to specifically talk about this for the people who did go a little bit further. So if you want to skip over to the next team, then I don't honestly blame you. So let's kind of get into it. So the really cool thing with combinations like this, like I explained earlier with Spahothea, where your buff attack, buff attack, buff attack, Jew is kind of the same way. It's attack channel, attack channel, attack channel. You know what I mean? It's the exact same thing. So if you were to have P1 Anjo, then that means that's 2 follow-ups that she can actively cast in a single turn, which is pretty good. And those are AoE focused follow-ups. That's really good for helping you to get the jump up on enemies, because remember, Ju's normal attacks are primarily single target, right? And of course she targets the follow-up with the lowest HP enemy, and of course depending on her total stacks of liquor, it can determine the amount of times that the little extra damage effect kicks in. So you're really piling up a bunch of damage on one enemy, while Anjo's also in the back chipping away AoE and doing some really respectable damage, because again, 250 modifier with their attack is really good. Of course, and then what this ends up doing is it really accelerates the channel effect. Now, we already talked about the channel a little bit, but of course in Angel Temptation, which is going to be doing this beautiful strong attack at the end, which is actually going to be very strong. So that is what I would just say about this team. Now let's talk about potential partners that you can run instead of Ju. 37 makes for a really good option as well, because, well, she's just as active as Anjo. You know, you really do need to use her to get her ult. Well, not in this particular case because you're bounding her, but you can still use her to really accumulate a lot of Eureka. And then since you do have P1 Anjo, that follow-up is going to be really helping 37 fill up her Eureka very fast, which basically means it's easier access to her follow-up attack, which is actually pretty good. And of course that then means that if you're kind of just using both of them, you can really just explode off with a bunch of Eureka that you can get just suddenly out of nowhere. It's not anything crazy where she could potentially follow up 2 times in 1 turn, depending on the total start that you have. Like if you start at 4 and you do her ultimate and then you do just actions afterwards, sure, yeah, you could potentially maybe get 2 follow-ups in there, but it's very unlikely that you will get 2. But for the most part, even still having the consistency to get 1 pretty much almost every turn, which is pretty darn strong. There isn't really too many other minerals. You can go Windsong just to have a stronger single target presence on the field, and of course you have Anjo in the back kind of chipping away with the AoE support. The really cool thing about with Windsong is while she's not as active as Ju and 37, because they're primarily taking up 1 to 2 actions per round, the whole thing with Windsong is it's building up, right? You're building up action, right? Where you're then gonna be able to cast her attack as soon as you cast her ultimate, right? And that's where then the follow-ups come in with her. So that's really just where that is. You know, Windsong is still primarily still a fantastic option to work with, and it works out. You know, it works out the way that it works out, and that's just it from there. From other mineral options, you can even still use some of the older options. Kala's still a pretty fine option, even though she's definitely been crapped at this point, but she's still fine. I think that's it. I wouldn't really use like Eternity because she doesn't get her Euphoria just yet. Ezra, definitely not. Other star units that we have, outside of that, 2 Fairy, you don't really want to link off with a healer, all honesty. Lilia, I mean, Lilia might be a good one, actually. Lilia might be a good one for this particular reason, because it could be good for when she gets her Euphoria. That could be good, but I'm a little bit hesitant on that one. I would have to really make some, I would really have to kind of revisit that idea once she gets her Euphoria. But other than that, for right now, I think the primary options that you can go with Beast, with Star and Mineral would be 37, Ju, Windsong. Again, you can go Kala if you really wanted to, if it's kind of just like one of the only options you have. And yeah, you just kind of go from there. But the whole point of it is really just, it's only really good if you have P1 Anjo. But if you have P0, then I don't think you really need to be doing this team. It's more so just it's just not as good as the single target version. That's just it. It's just not as good as the single target version, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. So anyway, speaking of the single target team, let's get right into it. All right, and then the final team that we're going to be talking about here today is going to be with intelligence and spirit in mind. Now, to be fairly honest, when I looked at the potential partners for intelligence and spirit, 6 is the unit that really stood out to me. And you're probably wondering, wait, why? Why is he on this list? He's an old character. Why him? Well, it's actually because of Anjo's ultimate. Remember that I talked about earlier that you want to have some negative statuses so that Anjo's ultimate can hit a lot harder? Well, guess what? Guess who happens to have a whole bunch of negative statuses? This guy. I mean, this guy. If you guys don't know, 6 has access to a variation of negative statuses that he can put on enemies, and this is very good because this means that this is going to do nothing but increase the total modifier of this attack. This is effectively, right, if you get up all of 6's main debuffs right here, that's a 180 modifier buff. And then remember, you gotta remember, Anjo herself puts up an additional 2 negative statuses, and since she's bounded by since he's bounding 6, that's going to be another debuff that you can put up here. So you can very well easily get to the 3 negative statuses that he has direct access to, and you can get the additional from her, because actually Anjo's negative statuses actually are a little bit different. She does have some that's on here that's the same, like the blind effect, for example, the wound actually no, not nasty wound, the miss same is what that he has, but nasty wound is something that he does not have. Scared is not something he doesn't have. I believe he doesn't have confusion either. So there's still some debuffs that you can put on the enemy to further pressure them. With 5 unique negative statuses, that's 300% extra modifier that you can add to this attack, which is really strong. And of course, as I talked about earlier, when linking with a spirit or a intelligence based character, you get access to this as a follow-up as the Feast of Lust. Now this is actually way better because again, it's unconditional. As I mentioned before, the big issue with the AoE version, if she's not P1, and it's only casted once per round. But with being B nothing and linking off with the spirit or intelligence character, this is casted as many times as it needs to be. And that's actually really good. And remember, this attack has a really decent modifier, because look at this. When attacking a target for every type of negative status, deals an additional 40% mental damage. I mean, we just talked about why 6 was really good here, right? I mean, and then even if you go for the higher rounds, you know, it's 450 plus 100% for every mental damage. That's just as strong as the ultimate. Honestly, it's a 500, and then boom, an additional 60. I mean, that's just as strong as ultimate. So the general TLDR is you're going to be able to cast off some very strong single target polos, especially if you're able to crit, especially if you're able to really get the most of the damage, which should be very well easily done with access to Vila. As I said before, Vila is a very important unit for mental units, so it won't not even sit up here and try to like mix games with you about that. Again, Kakania, we just run Kakania for sustain. That's really just it. You don't have to run Kakania. Again, she's more so for like the harder hitting bosses out there. But if you wanted to be a little bit more cheeky and try to really fit another negative statuses in the team, if you really wanted to, you can technically run Isolde in this team, right? You can technically run because nobody in this team puts up burn. And well, burn is, you guessed it, a negative status. So here it is, burn right here, negative status. So that's again yet another utility thing that you can do that can actually help with accelerating that damage output for her. Now this is again more so specific, and it's really just what you prefer, what you want to do personally, but again, it works. It's a very rewarding type of playstyle, especially if you're fighting a single target based enemy. If you're fighting a single target based enemy, you want to link up with someone with spirit or intelligence, because that's going to be very good for you. You're going to be able to get the extra effects. You're going to get all that good damage. You're going to be able to really capitalize on the potential DPSing potential of Anjo, especially if you run her with 6. So, I mean, it's really hard for me not to recommend 6 over anyone else, like even under some of the more premium units. If you also want to, if you don't want to run 6 and you just want like someone that can actively deal more damage, of course there's always Lucy. Lucy is absolutely fine to use. If you want to run another support option, Mercuria is also another pretty decent option that you can run too for linking purposes, because Merc is still fairly active just like how Lucy is. Both Lucy and Merc are fairly active in what they want to do. If you're like mine and it's at P1, her activeness actively does drop down, so it doesn't actually become that good of an idea. The only thing you really want Merc at that point to be doing is doing her buff, so that you can put up crit rate for everyone. But other than that, you don't really need to, because you're going to have good enough generation for your cosmic energy to stay it up at a high enough point, which is consistently giving Anjo 50% critical damage, and the incantation might bonus as well, and all that, and the damage delta bonus from her field. So you don't necessarily need to use Mercuria if she's at P1 or above, but P0 she does need to be a little bit more active, of course, so that still actively works out just as fine. Let me see, any other, I wouldn't say Tuesday, because Tuesday more so wants her own specific team, I feel, so I don't think that's really a good idea. But other options, of course, again, I already talked about Isolde for the extra negative status. A knight, not really a knight, because he doesn't really add anything specific to what you really want for Anjo. Again, he's just going to be more so a beat state that you can use with him, but I mean, use with her, but other than that, nah. But that's generally just it. I mean, you really just want to run someone like 6, or you want to run someone like Lucy or Merc, if anything. I think those are kind of like the best options that you can run when you're looking to form a bonding with spirit or intelligence base in mind. And yeah, but those are going to be the main teams that I look at for each of the bondings for her contract, because that's going to be the best way that you can really look to do it, is because her best teams are really good. I mean, all of her teams are really strong. They're very viable for all forms of content, and just go ahead and use her, dude. Like, if you pulled Anjo, congratulations, you got yourself a cracked unit. Anjo is absolutely in freaking insane, dude. I cannot make that more clear. But this has been your boy Jet Stingren. Let me know what you guys think about the teams in the comment section below. If you have any teams of your own that you would like to share, please leave it in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.